Welcome. Thanks for tuning in to the Rentvesting podcast. Rentvesting.com.au is going to go live this week, so it's a pretty exciting and quite a feverish time in my office. No different to the East Coast property market as well. Sydney seems like it's just too hot to handle. All eyes are definitely focused on Brisbane and Melbourne. Well, Melbourne's just marching to its own beat. On today's show, we're going to give you a market wrap. So, let's get to it. I had the pleasure of attending the Sydney Property Buyers Expo over the weekend and listened to a presentation by Tim Lawless of CoreLogic. Now, he's one of the main number guys at the Property Research House. While people were busy scribbling lots of notes, I only managed to walk away with a few scratches on my pad, mainly relating to the stats of the Australian residential property market. It really surprised me. I didn't realise that it was actually estimated to be worth some $6.6 trillion. To give you a comparison, the next largest asset class is super at $2.1 trillion. So figuratively speaking, the residential property market is 3 times larger than the super industry. It's massive. To give you another comparison, the share market is tiny at $1.7 trillion. Now, there were thousands of investors, young and old, that walked through the expo doors over the 3 days, and I had the opportunity to speak with many, all of which are keen to learn and grow or start their investment journeys. Lots of opinions were shared with me on what's hot and what's not so hot, so I thought it'd be only fitting to pass on a bit of a market wrap. Brisbane is my hometown, so let's start there. And, well, little old Brisbane, it's just chugging along, while the Golden Girls down south have really continued to hog the limelight over the past 4 years. In all fairness, though, the Queensland property market has had a fairly rough ride ever since the GFC. In fact, parts of it have jumped up and down all over the place. It's really quite hard to keep up. According to the Domain Group House Price Report for the June quarter, the Brisbane house market has been pretty steady in recent years, and this quarter was no different, with the median price rising around about 1.2% to a relative price of around about $522,000. By comparison, unit prices have fallen by 1.8% to a pretty reasonable $370,000, which will no doubt start attracting more investors. According to the report, buyers are looking for more affordable options and, perhaps should consider diversifying their search to include both houses and units. With unit prices at their lowest since 2013, it's looking like a prime time for first-home buyers to actually break into the market and perhaps find a gem at a pretty modest price. Now, there is a well-publicised oversupply of new units in the Brisbane inner city. However, there's also signs that developers have started putting projects into hiatus or attempting to on-sell their sites. Experts say that while it's pretty likely that there will be more unit supply than demand in a smaller number of inner city areas over the next 6 to 12 months, this is pretty normal. And it's pretty normal as any property cycle goes through its motions and will return to equilibrium once that supply has been reduced and absorbed into the market. More interstate investors are sizing up Brisbane and Queensland generally. I heard a lot of people down at the expo commenting on their interest in the Sunshine Coast, and they view it as affordable compared to Sydney or Melbourne. The Sunshine State has a lot going for it. More than just weather and affordability, there's also superior yields compared to the southern states. The true winner, though, in our property market at the moment is by far the Sydney property market. It's well and truly the golden girl at the moment, and according to Mr. Lawless, it currently represents somewhere around 60 to 70% of the market, which is massive when you think about those sort of numbers that I mentioned earlier. At the moment, Sydney seems just too hot to handle. It was meant to take a breather in 2016. Can anyone remember? Now again, referring back to the Domain Group House Price Report for the June quarter, lower interest rates have really bolstered buyer confidence, and Aussies are getting back out into the market, hunting for homes and investment properties. The revival of the market activity means that Sydney prices are on the rise yet again, and the median house price has bounced back up over $1 million. More precisely, $1,021,968, which means that prices are up 2.4% compared to the last quarter. And it's not just home prices climbing, medium unit prices have also increased and are now close to 670 grand. That's up 0.6% from last quarter as well. Now, some property experts, they're scratching their heads, pondering why the slowdown that they forecast actually didn't materialize. So according to those in the know, it's because there's still, a huge undersupply of property in the Sydney market. Even though there's been, plenty of media beat-ups about oversupply of new units, that's just a small part of a much bigger story. More people are shifting to Sydney and then, leaving the types of properties that they want to live in, and, they're just not being built or actually being sold. Baby boomers, it's reported, are really holding on tightly to their long-term homes because the type of property that they want to downsize into just isn't being constructed. They're simply not interested in units designed for the investor market. So think smaller floor plans and offer inferior positions. Now, the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales in particular believes that the extraordinarily high cost of stamp duty, which has soared to around about $40,000 on a medium-priced Sydney property, is acting as a major impediment. Many would-be sellers are simply deciding that the cost to sell and buy again are not worth the effort, so they're staying put. When you do buy and resell again, sometimes it can be between 8 to 10% of the total transaction cost, which is massive. But more and more would-be investors are considering buying in other parts of the country as a way of getting a foothold into the market somewhere and continuing to rent wherever they live. Rentvesting is definitely gaining momentum, and Sydney-siders are eyeing off places like Brisbane. Melbourne is strong as well. It's up almost 45% since 2012, which is amazing. The problem with Melbourne's performance over the past few years, however, is that one part of the market has been making more headlines than it should have, and perhaps tainting the overall view. Some other capital cities, Melbourne included, has a bit of a problem with oversupply of new units, and that problem could actually get even bigger. There's a huge flurry of apartment development that's happened over the last 5 years, which has seen supply ramp up to, exceed the supply limits of many inner city areas. Melbourne has also firmly been on the radar of foreign investors, with many buying in, new high-rise projects as a way of safeguarding funds outside of their own home countries. The problem now is that many of the developments are coming to completion and valuations are coming in well below contract price, leaving many buyers actually scratching around to make up the difference. On a much more positive front, Melbourne's market had the strongest annual growth of any capital city, again referring back to the Domain house price report for the June quarter. This quarter, Melbourne's median house price hit a record high of almost $741,000. Prices have increased 7.4% over the past year in the city's bustling property market as buyers and sellers make the most of lower interest rates. Melbourne unit prices are also on the rise, with the median price increasing to almost $451,000, which may be impacted in the future due to the new supply of issues. In the hipster suburbs like Brunswick, Collingwood, Fitzroy and St Kilda, the chances of actually a Gen Y being able to afford to buy in these locations is getting smaller and smaller. But they're certainly suburbs that people love to live in. That's why so many people are actually considering rentvesting as a strategy, and perhaps continuing to rent and party in St Kilda, but buying in more affordable property areas like Adelaide, just to get onto the property market somewhere. Experts say that Melbourne's property price growth is likely to slow in 2017, but they also said that last year as well. So the best guess would be to say that in the future, demand for city property across the country is going to continue, and supply will likely struggle to keep up. So if you snooze, you may just lose. Buying the best that you can, and preferably in one of the major capital cities, is always the better strategy than buying nothing at all, if you ask me. So that wraps up another episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. To get all the latest news, interesting facts, and stories on how people are rentvesting their way to success, be sure to check out www.rentvesting.com.au, which will be alive and well and truly kicking and screaming by the week's end. But until next time though, bye bye.